Welcome to the Inclusion Journey podcast, where you'll hear candid conversation about compelling concepts in education. Join this unforgettable inclusion journey as we explore the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Nupur Sethi, the host and the creator of this podcast, former teacher and a fellow advocate for inclusive classroom and inclusive society. We are kicking off this podcast series about an inclusive practice that is not new. In fact, it dates back to 1980s. An inclusive practice that's not old, yet not commonly heard of. An inclusive practice that reaps great benefit, yet difficult to get started with. What am I talking about? I'm talking about co-teaching, where two teachers come together. A special education teacher and a general education teacher come together to co-plan, co-teach, and co-assess. Now that might sound like a big mountain to climb, and that's why this podcast series, where each month you're going to hear directly from those who are on this journey to implement, such as administrators and teachers. And you're also going to hear the stories of those who are benefiting from implementing co-teaching, such as students and parents. For my first episode, I couldn't think of anybody else except Sebastian to be our guest. Sebastian has over 27 years of experience in education. For most part of it, he has spent in Fresno Unified School District, where he was born and raised. He's an award-winning educator. In 2013, he was recognized as Fresno Unified High School Teacher of the Year. In 2020, the AXA Region New Administrator of the Year, and most recently, 2023, he was recognized by Palo Alto Community in Special Education, recognized those educators who go extra mile to create positive experience for kids with special needs. Sebastian is currently an administrator of Green Middle School in Palo Alto. Now, the reason that I truly wanted Sebastian to be our first guest is more than this ornate bio. It goes back to my first interaction with him, and his words were stuck in my head when he said, whatever it takes to do best for all students. When he said that, there was no fear in his voice, and his tone and his words clearly told me that he was ready for any challenge. And I'm excited to learn from him, from all of us to learn from him, of his brave journey of embracing innovation and inclusive practice to create inclusive classroom. Let's step in together on this unforgettable inclusion journey with Sebastian. Welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the introduction.
Sebastian, I kind of gave in the bookish definition of co-teaching. Can you paint the picture, like what does co-teaching look like?
I love what you said. I think you're right on the money. And in listening to you, co-teaching is having two teachers in the classroom. Originally, it started with an ed specialist or special educator and a general education teacher. And then it's just transformed over the years. I mean, listening to you, I realized that we've come a long way. I often forget that the origin of co-teaching was to support students with IEPs.
Right.
And taking a step forward at Green, we've actually created a number of co-taught classes to the point of where people can no longer identify particular classes with co-teachers in them as classes for students with special needs or IEPs. It is just common practice. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a co-taught class, no one really knows how you were selected to be in that course. So I think you said co-teachers co-plan, co-teach, co-assess, but I think the one thing that I love the most about co-teaching is co-connection. Co-connection between the teachers, having somebody always there to be a sounding board, to provide you positive feedback, some reinforcement, because it's a very challenging position as an educator, and then also to give you maybe a different perspective on things that you may not have noticed before. And for students, always trying to find the right way to deliver instruction. We all have our own unique style of teaching. I'm sure if we taught the same lesson, you would teach it one way and there would be something distinctly different about how I did it. And so giving students that opportunity to receive instruction from two different styles of teachers. And so those students have a connection with each one of those those teachers. And so it's two opportunities for students to get to know two different teachers, possible mentors, possible go-to people that they could look for support. And like in any co-teaching classroom, there are 7 models. Some people argue that there's only 6 because the 7th model, which is team teaching, would incorporate all of the other 6 models of co-teaching. So to me, that's really what co-teaching is having 2 teachers in the classroom, whether they be an ed specialist and a general education teacher. And like at Green, we have reading specialists team with social studies teachers, 2 certificated science teachers, and 2 certificated math teachers in some of our co-taught classes.
So when was the first time you had heard about co-teaching? I can honestly say that, like, as a general education teacher, I collaborated with a special education teacher, but I really didn't know the word of co-teaching until I came here and I'm like, oh, co-teaching is a thing. And then doing the research for the podcast, I'm like, man, this has been a common thing. And having more than a decade of experience, like, I didn't know what co-teaching. When was the first time you heard about this term co-teaching?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me as your guest. I think we're so busy as educators. I mean, our job is really nonstop, and we never have the time to sit and reflect on the work we're doing and possible future projects or additional ways to support students. So this conversation is fantastic because the first time I heard about co-teaching was in Fresno Unified. I was actually a co-teacher, and our conversation made me realize that I owe Brian Mott half of my High School Teacher of the Year award because he was actually my co-teacher the year that I won it. So, in all of the hoopla and the award ceremony and the recognition, I was just so overwhelmed. I should have stopped, and I'm going to call him today and tell him that he is my co-teacher of the year for that year because I couldn't have done any of that without him. And I think we went off of what we knew best. I know that Fresno Unified provided us training, but it wasn't extensive training that the Inclusion Collaborative provides our teachers. For the last 3 years, the Inclusion Collaborative has trained our co-teachers in Palo Alto Unified School District. And for the last year, we've worked really closely with the Inclusion Collaborative to train Green teachers, specifically going in and providing training at the beginning of the year, going in and doing some instructional rounds with our teachers, showing them what to look for in the classroom, engaging in conversation at the end of the day on what we saw, some glows and some grows, some next steps, as well as some coaching, ongoing conversation. Again, I received fantastic training in Fresno Unified. Thank you, Fresno Unified, for all of the things that you instilled in me and the lessons that were learned. But the Inclusion Collaborative have taken it to another level with ongoing support to the point of where our teachers know that if they need support, they know where to go to and how to go about having conversations about improving instruction. So it goes way back to when I was in Fresno Unified, which is about 2010. And I had several co-teachers, Brian Mott at Hoover High School, and then Emily Fairless at Wawona Middle School. Those were the 2 co-teachers that I had, and it was a wonderful experience. I think I grew immensely during those 2 experiences because I always had them there to support me, to give me perspective, to help me make the lessons more accessible. And then they always encouraged me when I thought I couldn't do it, those really tough days. And then there were times where we had tough conversations and we decided to go a different direction and possibly reteach a lesson that wasn't so successful. So it was a great experience for me. Yeah.
And as you were talking, Sebastian, I was thinking, I think this is a great podcast here to have with educators because then you realize other great teachers, like, this is an opportunity to give them the credit because, it's like, raising a child, it's a village that it takes. And that's where the co-teacher, that you have to have other teacher. And the other thing that you said previously, you came up with the co-connection. So, like to have that co-connection to be able to deliver, co-plan, co-teach, and co-assess. So now you implemented as an administrator co-teaching. Tell us the first steps that you took.
Well, when I arrived in Palo Alto Unified, they they were already utilizing co-teaching in their classrooms. And so for the first year, I really just observed. It was primarily a general education teacher and a ed specialist or special education educator. And so just observing what was happening, what was going on. We were only provided training at the beginning of the year before the school year started. And then from there wasn't really much direction overall. And so as I observed the first year of co-teaching in Palo Alto, I realized that more training was needed, and also started to reflect on how the teachers were selected, how the courses were identified, the load on the teachers. They had multiple preps. Our ed specialists had multiple preps, and the impact on them, as well as the impact on the time for planning and preparation to support our students. And so all of this thought and conversation went into our planning for the following year, which we started to organize more training for our teachers, more in-service days so that the teacher, the co-teachers had time to plan. We offered them 1 full day of planning a quarter so that they could plan out the quarter in advance together. And then we reduced the number of preps that our ed specialist had so that they could focus on a grade level and a subject area. So when I first got there, we had some teachers that had ed specialists that had 3 preps. They taught 7th grade math, 6th grade math, and maybe a 7th grade ELA course. That's pretty difficult for somebody with that doesn't have the subject area expertise or knowledge to plan, prepare, and support our students. So we started to refine our practices. We started to notice some benefits. When I arrived at Green, we had about a 12% rate of DNFs in our student population. But over time, I noticed that there was a decrease in the number of Ds and Fs occurring in our co-taught classes. And that's when it started to ignite our idea of having co-taught classes throughout our universal schedule. And so that's what brought us to where we are now, where we have ongoing training and support from the Inclusion Collaborative. We have classes that have co-teachers like a reading specialist and a social studies teacher, 2 algebra teachers, 2 science teachers. We even had a class where we had an 8th grade English teacher and an 8th grade social studies teacher working together and cross-curriculum, cross-planning, and incorporating the lesson from English into social studies and vice versa. We have people volunteering to co-teach and identifying who they would like to co-teach with. And so I think the momentum is really going strong at Green because we have people stepping up who are interested because they see the benefits of co-teaching. Yeah.
And the data speaks it all, right?
The data has been tremendous. When I arrived at Green, we had a disproportionate distribution of Ds and Fs, overwhelming disproportionately, but now it has balanced out, and that students who are in co-taught classes are very successful and getting all of the support they need, to be quite honest with you. We've expanded the opportunity for students to receive support, not just in co-taught classes, but also after school with the same teachers that are supporting them in the classroom. And again, the data shows that our students are continually growing, showing improved outcomes and improved performance. And more than anything, I think the greatest data point is walking into a classroom and seeing students' smiles on their faces when you walk into a co-taught class, knowing that they're actually enjoying themselves.
Yeah. We're supporting another school district where they want to get on the inclusion journey and they're picking a model, like they're deciding which path to go to, UDL, co-teaching and things. And as you're saying, talking about looking at the data, like you looked at the DN and Fs and seeing the difference, like that's a great thing that's a great evidence in itself, right?
Yes.
To do that. So coming back to your first step, so did you look at the whole master schedule? Like you look at your master's schedule, like how many preps all the teachers have, and like is there where you looked at when you kind of talked about your first steps, like Okay, where can we give? Because I think your thought was to give them more planning time, because that's the first thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the teachers are the first thing that
Yeah.
they'll say, we don't have a planning time. We don't have
Yeah.
time to,
Yeah.
when do we collaborate? Your staff meetings are
I would
taken.
say the first step was really just looking at the needs of the students. So right away
Okay.
we looked at the minutes, service minutes that we needed to provide our students,
Right.
and then the supports that they needed to reach their goals. And then after that, we really talked to our teachers, our ed specialists, to find out what their needs were and what they believed were ways that they could better support our students. And that's where we came up with the idea of decreasing the number of preps. And so in decreasing the number of preps for the teacher, then we had to include some of our general education teachers to provide the co-taught classes. So we wanted to offer the same number of co-taught classes, if not more, but still decrease the number of preps that our ed specialists had. And in order to do that, we had to include our general education teachers. And that's how the idea of having 2 certificated general education teachers co-teach that idea was born, is because the need to keep up the same level of support for our students while decreasing the load for our ed specialist. Yeah, yeah.
And Universal Design for Learning and co-teaching.
Yes.
Universal Design for Learning is a framework which supports all students and gives access to the same content
Yeah.
in one classroom.
Yeah.
Now, what is the marriage about UDL and co-teaching?
I think they go hand in hand. I think it's a perfect combination, because for me, UDL is just embracing the diversity of all learners and providing them multiple opportunities of learning, and also of demonstrating their proficiency, their mastery of a subject matter through their various ways or multiple ways of assessment. And so when I think of the models of co-teaching, every single model provides a student a different way of learning the subject matter. And so within that model, UDL provides a menu of options for students to learn. So if there's 7 models of co-teaching, within 7 models, maybe there's 4 different assignments that a student can choose from to learn the lesson or understand the concept. So there's 28 different opportunities for our students to access the learning. And then at the end of that, the assessment goes hand in hand. So with the learning goes the assessment. So if there's 28 ways for our students to learn the subject matter and content, then there's probably 28 ways for the students to demonstrate their learning. And then from that data, our teachers sit down and assess the student outcomes and then design their next lesson based on the student outcomes, which will guide the instruction in terms of, was 28 too many? Was 28 not enough? What are some of the things our students really enjoyed? Which ways did they demonstrate their learning the best? And again, I'm thinking of one model in particular, the alternative teaching model and co-teaching, where we take a concept that we're teaching our students, and both teachers get the opportunity to teach the lesson. So they use their unique style to deliver the lesson, providing students in the same classroom 2 different opportunities to learn the concept based on the teacher's different instructional styles. And so it almost ensures that every student is covered in the learning. So you may have a teacher who's more hands-on and kinesthetic in their instruction, and then you have a teacher that may be more visual and provide more views of the learning so that the student can see what it looks like as opposed to what it feels like, and then also have conversation throughout the learning to ask students how they're feeling, checking for understanding and things of that nature. But UDL, like I said, is just providing multiple opportunities for students to learn, multiple opportunities for them to demonstrate their learning, and then again, if you multiply that by the 2 teachers that are in the classroom and the 7 different models of co-teaching, I mean, just, opportunity is abundant in a co-teaching classroom that utilizes UDL.
Yeah. And when you bring in the ed specialist or the special ed teacher, they have the access, knowledge about how to provide access and the content specialists coming together. And I like how you quantified it, like the opportunity.
Absolutely. The universal scaffolds and the universal supports that an ed specialist brings into the equation, as well as the universal supports and scaffolds that a teacher already utilizes in the classroom. I think that's one of our greatest strengths at Green, is that our teachers often utilize the universal supports in their classrooms on a regular basis. They offer them to every single student. And so no student feels singled out in terms of needing to utilize a graphic organizer or sentence frames or a vocabulary resource that a teacher provides or a handout. Everybody is provided that. Students utilize it as needed, and they feel confident knowing that those scaffolds and supports are always there if they need them, but it gives them the ability to test where they are at a particular time by not utilizing them, right? And then going back to them knowing that they're always there to fall back on. So I'm really proud of our teachers at Green, because quite often when we talk about supporting students and student study teams, they often talk about ways of supporting students that are already incorporated in the daily instruction, and I'm just really proud of that. Yeah.
We'll have to call the Green teachers. You'll have to just find subs and call them.
Yeah, absolutely,
Green teachers.
absolutely.
We need Green teachers here.
For sure, for sure.
To have that from that perspective.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about UDL and the co-teaching, offering from both perspective and giving those choices to the kids, where the UDL's main goal is expert learning. Right? So today I don't feel like using a sentence frame. I feel like using a graphic organizer. I don't need my vocabulary book. Right? So the kids are making the choice, and ultimately we want expert learners and making their own choices. So that really leads into the ultimate goal of UDL.
Absolutely. And again, I love the conversation because it kind of triggers some thoughts. But I just had a conversation yesterday with a group talking about how to utilize our leadership students, who are like 30 to 50 additional employees on campus who are there to support their fellow students, right? So one of the models in co-teaching is stations. And oftentimes when people talk about stations, they're like, well, if you have 2 co-teachers and you have 4 stations, you could possibly have 2 stations where there's teachers. Right. But no one ever talked about, like you just said, why not an expert learner at one of the stations reinforcing their learning by supporting their fellow students in the learning, right? Yeah. And then further strengthening their knowledge in the content areas. So those of you that are co-teaching and you're utilizing the station model, realize that you have some expert learners in the classroom that could run a station for you, and how much pride and confidence that would build in that one student to be able to run that station and support their peers in the classroom.
Yeah.
I love that.
Wow.
I love that. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, imagine the self-esteem of that.
Definitely. My goal would be as a student to be able to run a station someday, right? Yeah. And everybody has an opportunity, because everybody has, throughout the school year, we may learn 30 to 40 different concepts. And this one particular concept is the concept that I'm most expert in. So the teacher's going to pick me to be able to run that station. And what pride will that build, and what confidence will that build in me to continue my learning in other areas? Because basically I'm the 3rd teacher in the classroom, and that feels wonderful to be that.
Yeah. How beautiful will that be?
Yeah, for sure.
So you were on this journey and you implemented co-teaching. What were the immediate benefits that you saw? I mean, you kind of went in that direction with the grades, and you saw less of that. But what else, like specifically, what were the immediate benefits? I mean, it won't be immediate benefit, because it takes time to, it's like weight loss, right?
It does take time, but believe it or not, there are immediate benefits.
Yes, okay.
And it's what you brought to my attention at the very beginning. It's the co-connection. It's honestly the co-connection. When you walk, when you see students, you could stand there on the first day of school, and you could stand at the door, and you could watch students walk into a classroom and they see Mrs. Hancock and Mrs. Placencia standing there in the classroom. They have this huge smile on their face because they know that they're going to be supported by one or the other, right? And sometimes they already have an established relationship with one, and that gives them the confidence to kind of reach out and establish a connection with the other one, right? Especially when they see the two teachers talking and connecting and smiling and interacting. And if they get along with Miss Placencia and they see that Miss Placencia gets along with Miss Hancock, then that kind of gives you the confidence to go to Miss Hancock knowing that she's a person that Mrs. Placencia trusts. And so for the teachers, again, you have that partner to partner think, to plan, to analyze data, to get feedback constantly. And again, for the students, you have the two teachers that you could look to really depend on. And again, like the data shows, it's not just D's and F's, although at Green we really do focus on the one data point of D's and F's and the success of the students. But you could look at our iReady data, you could look at our CASP data, our SBAC, ELA, math data, our science data. You could see our students are really growing. And if you really just look at our students that are in co-taught classes, they're growing at an exponential rate, and I think it has a lot to do with every day they're learning. They're learning from one or the other teacher and making that connection. So it really does help, because when you're the only teacher in the classroom, you could have a bad day.
Right, yeah.
So
right.
if you're in a co-taught class and you're the teacher and you're having a bad day, then you could just make the switch. Right, you could do the one teach, one assist. You could do the one teach, one observe, and let the other teacher take over. And then you kind of, through that standing back and observing or standing back and assisting, it might put you in the right mind frame or mindset to, like, become a bigger part of the lesson. I know that it's happened to me. I walked into a class one day. I was having a really rough day. I told Mr. Mott, hey, I'm having a tough day today. Can you take the lead? He said, absolutely, yes. And then as he was teaching and engaging with the students, he really inspired me. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing? Like, I really need to get in the game and, like, get more involved. And so, when students went to work independently, I went to them and I told them thank you. But I told them we could change up our model right now and we could do parallel teaching or some stations, because I was feeling much better and I appreciated his support. And there were days where he leaned on me. But, that classroom, that knowing that I'm going to teach this class with someone else, they're supporting me, gives me great confidence. And the students walking into a classroom with two teachers, I would say, just as an experiment, put 5 teachers in a classroom, not for the year, but for the day, and let students walk in and watch their reaction. It will be amazement to walk in and see so many people in the classroom there to support them. They will be amazed. So it's always a great feeling, knowing that you have more support as a student and knowing that you have someone there to lean on as a teacher.
Our in-depth conversation with Sebastian about co-teaching will continue in our next episode.